Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live guest interview within Mindful Journey. Delighted that you're here with us today. For those of you who might have just heard, Dyah and I having a little brief side chatter. He is an accomplished boxing coach. I'm going to share a little bit more about his resume, but beyond his coaching and American Top Team, he is an entrepreneur and founder of Boca Boxing District, which for those of you who live in South Florida and Boca Raton, or if you're even traveling at some point, highly recommend you checking out the gym. It's a great culture, atmosphere. And whether you've never boxed, want to box, or have always boxed, it's definitely the place for you. Adaya is an accomplished professional boxer, retired now at this juncture, having amassed a record of 26 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. Forgive me, Daya, I had put only 25 wins when I put it on social, man. But you, you,
All good,
you
man. I caught it and I was like, nah, I need every win, brother. You got to add that extra win.
no doubt, no doubt. I could go on and on about his accolades, but just a brief aside, as I've gotten to know Di over these past few months, he epitomizes servant leadership and has an evident, caring heart in a sport that most from the outside who might not have partaken in, being boxing, they might view it as a violent experience, and of course it can be. But Dia, I think, is great for the sport, is great for humanity, is great for business, is just great for anyone who's looking to get better. And inside Mindful Journey, that's what we're all trying to do, Diet, trying to get better, trying to make small shifts in daily habits to enhance our effectiveness. So I know you're going to add some wisdom and value to us today. Grateful for you being here and looking forward to our time spent together.
Thank you, man. Again, it's my absolute pleasure. And I always look forward to just having these type of conversations, anything that can breathe new life into people and to make them want to accomplish new goals or, just start a new journey in something that they've never done before.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff. Appreciate that. So your father, I know, was an Olympic gold medalist, and some of our listeners might already be aware of that as I put your bio out. I think 1976, if I'm not mistaken. And so
Yeah.
you were born into boxing to some extent. But for those who might not be familiar with his work or yours or your names, what got you like really motivated and captivated by the sport itself? And what's your journey in boxing looked like thus far?
Well, as a kid, as a teenager, I was always asked by my peers and, just older adults, like, hey, why don't you box? And as a teenager, I was only interested in basketball. From the age of 10, that was my focus. I played in some organized ball, as a kid. And, once I got to middle school and high school, I continued my journey there. And I got into college and my mom, she had moved to upstate New York. And I'm from Long Island, New York. And I just refused to move to upstate New York with her. I was just like, what am I going to be up there doing? Counting cows? Just I couldn't see myself going anywhere else. So she was like, all right, well, if you're gonna stay here on Long Island, then you better make sure that you enroll in school. So I did. I mean, school was never my forefront. I didn't, again, my path was basketball, but I knew, if I was gonna be picked up and looked at by anybody, it would be through the college system. So I enrolled. But being that she moved upstate New York and I stayed in Long Island, I ended up renting a room at my aunt's house. So now I had some grown people liabilities. I had bills to pay now, I had a rent to pay, and car insurance and gas and so on and so forth. So once I got to college, my hoop dreams were basically out the window because I had to work. I had to accumulate some funds in order to fit my everyday needs. So I did a year at Nassau Community College. This is in Long Island. And after about a year, I was just like, man, school's not for me. So I had a couple of jobs. I worked at a place called After Hours. It's now closed. It's been taken over by Men's Warehouse. I know with the name like After Hours, it sounds a little sketchy. Like, what's going on after hours? No, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But it was a tuxedo company. So I handled proms and weddings, and I was a manager at the store for a few years. And at some point during that time, I was just like, man, I don't see myself handling weddings and proms for the rest of my life. Like, I got to figure out something else. So still, had no clue what journey I wanted to pursue. And then later that evening, there was a fight on between Lennox Lewis and Vitaly Klitschko, and I just was taken aback by that fight. I watched all. I think it went maybe 6 rounds, and Lennox ended up winning by way of TKO stoppage. Vitaly had got cut, so the fight was announced as a TKO victory for Lennox. I was just like, I think I can do this. And Vitaly was called on short notice. He was like, I think he had like 3 or 4 weeks to prepare for the fight, and he was doing very well up until that cut. And with that being said, like knowing that he had some great moments in that fight, I was like, man, I think I could do this. I think I could be heavyweight champ of the world. And at the time, I was like almost 230 pounds. So I was like literally one Twinkie away from being fat.
So when you saw this fight, you're 230 and you're saying, "Man, I can be heavyweight champ of the world." What after that? What do you call your dad and say, "Dad, I'm going to be heavyweight champ of the world"? I'm presuming you weren't with your wife at the time, but was
No,
there
I
someone
wasn't.
in your was there
Yeah,
someone in your life?
I was actually with a group of friends, and being that they all knew that my father had boxed, they was like, man, if this is what you want to do, I'm 100% supporting you. So they kept egging me on and egging me on, and I was like, yeah, all right, let's go. I got the support that I need from my friends. And then the next day, I called my dad, and he laughed about it at first. I said, Dad, I want to box, and he said, box what? Oranges and grapes? And I said, no, Dad, I think I could be heavyweight champ of the world. He was like, all right, well, first things first, you need to start doing your road work. So I did that. And, he also let me know that I wasn't going to be a heavyweight. He said, once you start your road work, he's like, that weight's going to fall right off of you. And it sure enough did. Like I did road work for 6 days a week for about 4 months. I ran 3 miles um, every time out. And in 4 months' time, I had lost like 45 pounds. So, I called him up and I was like, Pops, I lost all this weight. And I really believe that was like ideally just trying to see where my head was at with it. If I was disciplined enough to get up every day and run, whether or not I would stick with it. And that was really only the only thing that he actually gave me was to do was just to run. He didn't say anything about shadow boxing or going to seek a boxing gym or anything like that. He just wanted to see if I was dedicated to running and losing the weight. And then in 4 months, I said, all right, I lost 45 pounds. Now what? He said, it's all right. He said, I want you to reach out to your uncle because my dad was here in Florida. He was already training MMA fighters here at American Top Team. And I reached out to my uncle, who was also a Golden Gloves champion. He was a stellar amateur, and he went pro as well. He was 5-0 as a pro. And so I reached out to my uncle. We did a couple sessions at the gym, and I think he gave me the tools that I needed before coming to South Florida to see my dad. So my dad invited me down to South Florida. He was like, "Look, I'm gonna give you a 2 week trial. If you got what it takes, you stay. If not, you heading back up north." I was like, "All right." So that was that, man. I came down. I stayed for the 2 weeks, and he thought I had what it takes to be, if not a stellar amateur, then a solid pro.
Mhm. That's got to be as you reflect back on that die, like a gratifying moment to know that your dad, who obviously loved you just from a father-son perspective, not only embraced you as his son, but gave you the blessing to continue something that he was an expert in. Because it would have been deflating, I assume, had you gone to him and been like, Daya, like, this isn't for you, man. Like this,
Yeah,
this ain't the path. Like, do you remember those moments? Like what your journey with him was like? Did you guys dive right into the trenches and just get to work, or did and regardless of that, did it deepen your relationship from father-son perspective?
100%. So he was training a heavyweight by the name of Chad Butler, who is no longer with us. I think he was murdered
Mm,
viciously. I mean, he was like shot in his car, and the car was lit to flames. But anyway,
mm,
so my dad was training Chad, who at the time was like 7-1. His only loss was to Sultan Ibragimov, who ended up being world champion. Um, I watched him train Chad, and the moment he was done, had done a couple of boxing, like I said, I had done a couple of boxing lessons with my uncle, but I was just so engulfed in the moment that right after the training session with Chad, I jumped in the ring and I started shadow boxing, really not knowing what I was doing, but my dad saw some athletic ability there. Like I idolized not only my dad, but Muhammad Ali. So, I tried to move like him, floating around the ring and jabbing at the same time. And once he saw that, he was sitting down with a friend who had just, also watched the training with my dad and Chad. And he kind of nudged my dad. He was like, "Hey man, check your son out over there. He's in the ring." So he looked over and he was like, all right, I see what you got. I see what you got there. He's like, "All right, come on out, come on out." He's like, "Look, it was a Friday that I had jumped in that ring and started doing my shadow boxing." He's like, "Look, we're gonna start on Monday." So I was like, "All right." So all weekend, here I am prepping and getting my mind ready for, what's to ensue on Monday. And it
Yeah,
was great. I mean, uh, the father-son relationship, with boxing only brought us closer together. Boxing was obviously a passion of his, and when I was able to share that passion with him, it just drove us closer. We were like best friends.
that's awesome. That's awesome, Dia. I'd like to go, a little. I told you we would go deep and beyond the surface, and to your level of comfort, everything will be. You don't need to share anything too personal, but I think I've heard from a lot of folks, who struggle with like trying to live up to expectations. I had previously on here Mark Cuban's brother, Brian Cuban, who sadly had like suicidal ideations and suffered with addiction and stuff. And he opened up to us saying a lot of that was a result of he was always living in the shadows of his brother, right? Like he never felt like he was going to be enough. Did you face some of that, Di? Like your dad was, articulated in the likes of Sugar Ray Leonard, and I think if memory serves me from the research I'd done, that he won an award in that 1976 team over Sugar Ray. Did you experience any of that? And if not, no, certainly no worries. But I'd love to hear your recommendation to our listeners because you've probably been exposed to people at least who might have a pressure they put on self based upon image they have to uphold.
Mhm,
What would your recommendation be um, to people if they're feeling like they have to be something to appear as successful, or appear as I'm good enough, or appear as, hey, I'm not Dyah Davis, the son of, I'm just Dyah Davis.
mhm. I think, coming into the sport, um, obviously behind him, I had to live up to certain expectations. But I think because I got into boxing so late, I was old enough to realize that, I am my father's son, but this is my own journey. I think I was wise enough to know that. And, my first maybe like 5 to 6 fights, I engulfed it. I loved every moment. Yes, the son of Howard Davis. I needed any niche that was going to help me propel my career. I didn't have an amateur experience, so I needed anything that I can get to help me get to the next level. No promoters were interested in me because I had no amateur background and I didn't have any Golden Glove experience or um, any Olympic experience or anything like that. So there was nothing for them to go off of other than I was the son of Howard Davis. So it actually just gave me a burning desire to prove my worth for the most sense. So, I put the extra hours in the gym. I ran the extra miles if I needed to. Um, I studied fight film, hours and hours upon hours of fight film. I mean, I'm going back to before YouTube was, where it is today. So I had a friend, another one of my dad's guys that he was training, just blessed me with a bunch of VHS tapes. So, I was watching like Sugar Ray Leonard, Evander Holyfield, Salvador Sanchez, Pernell Whitaker, uh, just a bunch of great fighters, man. I really tried not to watch any bull crap fights. I just only wanted to see greatness because that's where I pictured myself.
Mhm. Mhm. Brings me to an interesting thought in my mind, like a visualization of how important that has been for you in your career. I've heard other, athletes speak about, hey, I only wanted to envision or watch or engage in the things where I saw myself. What has visualization meant to you in your career? Were you reliant on it? Did you do anything prior to fights that like centered you and got you into a headspace that you felt you were operating from your peak?
I mean, I think starting and getting into my journey, I knew I had to be obsessed with what it was that I was doing. I didn't have the amateur experience or anything to fall back on. So, the countless hours in the gym, the constant studying, I knew that was, what needed to be done in order to be as good as I expected myself to be. So I was able to excel, at a pretty fast level because, that was my mind state. I think mind state is very important when getting into a sport like boxing. You know,
Mhm.
mindset is everything. I mean, you can be losing a fight, and because you have the stronger mindset and the will to come forward and the will to win the fight, will put you at an advantage.
Mhm. And where does that come from for our listeners? Where can they get that will to keep going? That's the stuff right there. That's the stuff I want to get. And I know it's not tangible, right? But that's why I'm asking, like, where does that will to keep going come from? After a loss, what gets you desiring to get back in the ring?
I think it comes from within, man. Those self conversations are very important. So I always tell people like, whenever you speak to yourself nice. Tell your things tell yourself the things that you need to hear. If you were someone who's coaching yourself, what positive things would you say to yourself to get that foot in the right direction?
Mhm. Mhm. Good stuff. So you coach, obviously I mentioned that in the opening, and as I dug in a little bit, I learned even more about you, brother. Even though I've known you for a few months and we've had good conversations, as I, did my due diligence to learn more to be prepared for today, I saw you had a great opportunity to coach some UFC greats and many names that folks who might be, follow, UFC or boxing or familiar with, but your exposure to some of these individuals that you've had a front row seat to seeing their championships and fighting in front of tens of thousands and then millions on TV. What do you think, from your vantage point, allows them to, excel? What, like, in other words, what's making the elites elite?
I think 100% mindset. Every champion and every elite fighter that I've worked with, they've all had a great mindset and the ability to overcome whatever it is that's in front of them. And even if they took a loss, they go back and they sit with themselves and they go back to the drawing board, chalk it up, and work on getting better. And whatever it
Mhm.
is that, they were deficient in their fight game.
Mhm.
The name of the game is always to excel and master your craft. And I think, most guys that I've worked with at the elite level have all harnessed those set of skills.
Mhm. And do you find that because I saw an American Top Team that, you're one of many coaches there, right? Obviously, it's a super well-known MMA gym throughout the country, but your specialty is striking, obviously, as a professional boxer. You're teaching, I'm sure, boxing primarily. Do these individuals that you're training, do you find that they, hire experts, if you will, for nutrition, for sleep, for striking, for ground? Are they very niche focused and like, mastering each part of their preparation?
So the gym itself, not so much. I think there are so many fighters there at American Top Team that it's pretty hard to do that for, there's at least over 100 fighters there. And, you have guys who are visiting. We have dorms for some of the guys who are visiting. Um, each individual fighter particularly takes care of that on their own.
Okay. So that's I guess my question is like what you've had, I know when you're at the gym, you're probably, American Top Team is the one contracting you essentially, but as you've worked with these individual fighters and have gotten to know them on a personal level, do you find what I'm trying to pull out and learn for our listeners primarily is because I'm a big believer in this, right? Like, finding the expert in a certain thing so you can enhance your skill in that thing can sharpen, you can't be a master of everything as an individual, but like, trying to find resources to master certain areas of their preparation. Does that happen? Is that an accurate thing? Like, do they hire nutritionists and a striking coach, or are they so talented that maybe they're not needing to do all that? Am I being presumptuous?
Um, it just all depends. I think a lot of guys who have done this for quite a while, maybe won't want to spend the money for a nutritionist. They've done it so many times. They know how to get to their weight, know how to cut weight properly. Other guys will maybe bring in a nutritionist the last 2 weeks. Maybe they've done all the labor and hard things on their own, and they want to take the edge off the last couple of weeks and a little less to focus on. You don't want to focus on the diet so much or preparing the meals. So they're bringing a nutritionist. Um, I've been to some fight camps where we're traveling for a fight, and the week of the fight, they'll bring their nutritionist with them to prepare all the meals and to make sure that's just one less concern that they have to worry about. The nutritionist will typically make the grocery runs, come back, prepare the meal,
Yeah,
specifically for the fighter. And the rest of the team will just fend for themselves.
yeah, gotcha. Good stuff. What's a common misperception that you think is out there among people who've never boxed or who have never, prepared for a fight? Like, what do you hear that people think about fighters that you're like, no, that's not true?
Uh, I think most people think that about fighters anyway, that they're not very nice people. And then once they come to meet fighters, they speak with them or have conversations with them. And wow, no, I didn't expect that. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I think
That
that's pretty common. Most people are intimidated by combat itself. So to come across a combat athlete and to hear them speak and their mannerisms and the friendliness, a lot of people are not wouldn't expect that. I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's an important, and I thought you might say that. I mean, from the very few gyms that I've been at throughout my life, I've that same experience has been felt. Like, boxers to me, I've never been around or trained in an MMA gym, but boxers to me always have, although there's obviously a confidence, you have to be somewhat type A to be a boxer. There's a quiet humility that exists where they actually have this deep compassion. A lot of times they get into boxing because it's a relief from something going on in their life. And folks who are dealing with pain tend to be more compassionate for others. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think it leads me to one of the deeper questions that I have for you. Like, one of the things that I'm wanting to do within Mindful Journey is to help people um, see themselves in an empowered state and to stop comparing themselves to everybody else, thinking that they know what they're going through, whoever they may be. One of the ways we've tried to do that is by asking, from people just like yourself, who others on the outside might say, oh, Dyah is an accomplished professional boxer. He's a husband, a father, owns a boxing gym, entrepreneur, like successful. They might
Right.
say he doesn't have hard days, man. He's got it all together. What what has been the most challenging thing that you've gone through in your life so that our listeners can know that, man, stuff happens to all of us. And then
Dude,
more
I've been
importantly,
through so many.
and then what's the things that got you through it, Dia? I think that's the juice here is that we want to get. What did you do to cope and get through it to be with us still today?
And a lot of time spent alone in a dark room with my own thoughts, but again, always speaking to myself positively. Listen, there's been tons of adverse moments in my boxing journey. Uh, I had a manager Uh, Rest his soul. His name was Bob Pergamon. He managed both myself and another fighter by the name of Saeed Owali. So now I was a boxer puncher. Owali was more of an aggressive style. He was also a southpaw. And although he picked us both up, he tended to favor Saeed a little bit more, only because he felt like either this guy was a knockout artist or he was going out for the kill. I wasn't a very out for the kill type of guy. Like I didn't mind either boxing, beating a guy, making him look foolish. Sometimes I would aggressively go out there and get the knockout, but I was a boxer puncher. So I didn't mind staying on the outside and boxing and winning a points decision. Um, I would do it as entertaining as possible. But again, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't a slugger. I wasn't out there to hit you and you let you hit me back, So I don't think he liked to see that so much. So he managed me for probably for about 2 years or so and decided he no longer wanted to manage me and continued on with the other fighter. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to change my style a little bit. Um, and you need that support from a manager, especially early on in your career. I didn't have promoters, you know, jumping at my phone, wanting to sign me. I had to prove my worth in order to get the eyes or attention of a promoter. And, not only winning fights, but also the guys that I was sparring with. I work with a lot of upper class guys. Um, so I was hoping that either word would get back to their promoters that I was doing well with their fighter in the gym in hopes to get picked up. So we've had along my journey, I was 9-0. Now you know the fighter that I lost to in my 10th fight. You said you
Tyrone,
interviewed
yeah,
him.
TT, yeah.
Yeah, TT. Um, that was my first loss and my first defeat. I took very hard. Um,
That was in Charleston.
that was in Charleston,
Was
North Carolina, at the Citadel. Yeah. So yeah, that was a fight that I thought I won on the cards, and he ended up being signed to the promoter. So the scorecards were already in his favor. One judge had it a draw, and the other two had it in his favor. Yeah, that was an adverse moment. I remember coming home after that loss and just not being able to sleep. Getting up in the middle of the night, going for runs. I'm talking about like 1, 2 a.m. Just getting out of bed, running in tears. Finish my 3 miles and come back home, and I would feel a little bit better. So again, like with those self talks and those conversations with yourself are very important because that got me back in the gym and got me ready for at least mentally for my next bout.
yes, yes. And then from a personal perspective, like I know you lost your dad, and I read that and I don't think you'd shared this with me on the front end, so I, hope I'm not bringing up something that's a sour subject for you. Saw that he lost his battle to cancer, and deeply sorry to see that. I'm sure that hit you hard. Um, would you mind, if to your level, kind of broadly expounding on that or other things that you've gone through? And the reason I ask, just to give you context, is like what I believe we all got stuff, right? Every single person listening to this now or who will listen to it later has got pressures from their board of directors, pressures from their family, maybe going through divorce, whatever it is, everyone's got something. And sadly, many times people become reliant on things to numb that. So when you've gone through other adverse things, it sounds like self-talk's huge for you. I want to pull that out for our listeners because I think it's powerful. Running after a fight, was therapeutic. But what else? Anything else that you can point to in your own life, and then like that got you through whatever that thing might have been?
I think motion and activity, anything that will indirectly take your mind off of what it is that you're going through will help get you through it in the end. And whether it be fitness, um, I mean, anything, movement, conversations with friends, family, going out for walks, reading books, anything to get your mind off of what you're currently going through But again, like reading positive things to get you through those moments. I
Yeah,
mean,
good
speaking
stuff.
on my dad's passing, of course, a very adverse moment. He was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer just a few days before his 59th birthday. And, I remember the first thing telling him was, this is just like a fight. We're going to put our hand wraps on, we're going to get geared up, and we're going to fight this thing and we're going to win it. And we had some moments where things were looking good, and, you know, then they weren't. So that is probably one of the most difficult times in my life. You know, some of my family members who weren't here, seeing my dad on a daily basis, they're always wanting to know, how's he doing today or what's going on, and what's the latest news. So just having to be strong for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, man. It's appreciate your vulnerability and definitely lots to pull out there. I'm hearing from you. Self-talk is very important. I love what you said, staying in motion. I'm a believer of that. Um, I think that there's value in all what you shared. And then community too. I think, I pulled out of that, talking to friends and being open. That's good stuff. Going back to the identity piece, I kind of brought this up before, but I think you've shifted from my vantage point in a way that is a positive one. Like you went from being fighter to now I'm a fighter trainer, I'm a entrepreneur, I'm an owner. What was it like when you finally realized, man, I think my boxing career is maybe behind me? Was it hard to accept? And if so, how were you able to ensure that you weren't trying to be Dyah who was versus Dyah what is?
Well, I'll take it back even further than that. I started coaching after one of my biggest wins. Um, my dad was just getting ready to pursue promoting in MMA. But being that he worked in an MMA gym, he thought that it would be a good field. He saw the trend where MMA was going. So he decided to promote. And with that going forward, he asked me if I'd be interested in taking over his job. And I was like, Dad, I just won the biggest fight of my life. Like, I'm about to make millions. And he's like, "Son," he's like, I'm not saying you aren't. He's like, but it doesn't always work out that way. And it'll be good to make some supplemental income while you're not fighting, while you're out of camp. And I was like, you know what? He's got a point. If you're not fighting, there's no money coming in. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. And then sometimes, as I started to do it, if a fight did come along, I'm like, all right, well, here I'm in training camp now. I either have to work on trying to get some days off or lessen the amount of people that I'm working with. And that's what I did. Most of the fighters that I worked with were either respectful to know if they didn't have a fight, they understood that the importance of my career and my journey and where I expected to go with things, and gave me the space and allowed me to do so. So yeah, so even during my journey as a fighter, I was coaching. So I've been coaching since 2010. And again, I just won my biggest fight. It was on Showtime. I beat an undefeated fighter by the name of Marcus Johnson. He was ranked 3 in the world. He had some regional titles. And granted, had he beat me, he was going to go on to fight for a world title. He was going to fight Lushan Bute, who was IBF champion at the time.
Mhm.
So I beat him uh, by way of unanimous decision. And believe it or not, I had actually sparred with Lushan Bute prior to that fight, maybe I'd say less than 6 months ago. So immediately my team and promoter got on the phone with Bute's camp and asked him for a fight. And I gave Bute hell in that training camp. Those sparring sessions, they were hell. So, they weren't quick to immediately jump on a fight with me. They said, look, we know he just won. We just watched. Let him get a few more fights. Let him really merit and demand for this fight. And I was like, man, I just beat the number 3 guy in the world who was going to challenge for the world title. I should have had this opportunity, but it was all good. It wasn't a path. Um, so I continued on. I had my next fight was against Darnell Boone, who was an upset artist. He beat guys like Adonis Stevenson, who ended up being world champion. He was the first guy to drop Andre Ward, who was super middleweight champion and light heavyweight champion and Olympic gold medalist in the 2012 2004 Olympics. Uh, so to beat the number three guy in the world and to fight an upset artist as my next challenger in Darnell Boone, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. This is stupid. Why am I fighting this guy now? It almost made more sense to fight a guy like that earlier on in my career as a litmus test to see whether or not I had the goods. But to beat a damn near title challenger and then go on to fight, a tough guy like Darnell Boone didn't make any sense. But I went on to win against Darnell Boone. We were scheduled for an 8-rounder. It ended up being a 6-rounder because it was a televised event, and a televised event, they have a time slot that they have to stick to. So they shortened our rounds just right before we went out. I said, "Oh, Davis, you're fighting a 6-rounder and not an 8-rounder." I'm like, "All right, as long as I'm getting paid the same, it's all good."
Yeah.
So yeah, I beat him unanimous decision, and then went on to fight Alfonso Lopez. That was for the NABF title. That was in Mallory Square in Key West, Florida. And I beat him unanimous decision as well. That earned, like I said, that earned me the NABF title, which furthered my rankings. Yeah.
That's good stuff. So what was it like? I saw I think you had a fight at US Cellular Field where the White Sox play Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. Probably had some other cool venues that you've been at, but particularly, and I asked this question, I hope I know your expertise is in boxing. I have I'm trying to drive us back to business principles and such for our listeners, and they connect with everyone who's going through different things who might not be exposed to boxing. So forgive me, that's why some of the I'm giving you context for some of these questions. But I think when the championship lights come on, if you will, in these big stages, I'm sure there was a butterfly type feeling or some sort of pressure that you might have felt. And I think a lot of times, and whatever a person may be doing, if they're a real estate agent or insurance executive or city manager or whatever their title may be in a corporate setting, right before they're about to ask for the raise or apply for the promotion or go for another job, they might feel a similar pressure. So when those championship lights came on for you, Dyah, when you were in US Cellular Field or wherever some of these cool venues were, and you knew thousands were watching and it was televised, Showtime, etc., is there anything that you recall doing that listeners can do to ensure that they show up as their very best in spite of the nerves and the fear that might even be there, quite frankly?
Yeah. Again, those self-talks are very important. I can recall a fight that I had in Ohio where I was in a dressing room and I'm like literally touching my forehead, like, man, am I sick? Do I have a fever right now? I don't feel so hot. I feel like I'm gonna throw up. And it wasn't nerves that was getting to me. I actually felt sick. Um, but again, it's the self-talk and the conversations that you got to have with yourself. Like I remember warming up right before my walkout, and I'm like, "Fuck that," part of my French. I'm like,
Not all good.
I don't care. I don't care how I feel. Like I'm getting the job done. And the moment I'm walking out to the lights, or to the ring, I enter the ring. Whatever it was that I felt, it was no longer there. You
Mhm.
know, mindset is very important, and to put yourself in the right mind state to tackle whatever task that you have at hand.
Definitely. Yeah, good stuff. So I know you have a son, right?
I have two,
Okay, two. Got and what are their ages?
ages 7 and 3. My oldest
Nice.
Noah, and my youngest Malachi, who's 3.
That's awesome, Daya. I'm sure that's bringing you so much joy, man. I know we just talked the other day in the gym how you were doing a session and felt like you weren't in the same type of shape that you used to be. And I think I made the comment like, "Hey, man,
Yeah,
you're in dad mode now,
yeah.
brother. So give
I'm a
yourself a little
dad now with
grace."
a dad bod.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, and I don't have kids. Hopeful to my wife and I, and but I have a lot of friends who do have kids, and I hear some of the challenges they face with them, and And then I hear from some of them, and I don't ever comment, but they'll be like, I want my son to be a professional baseball player, a professional football player. And I almost sense sometimes that they're trying to cast off who they wanted to be or who they were onto their kids. What are you doing as a father to ensure that like you're just being the most present dad who's hopefully, I mean, getting them into boxing would be an amazing thing. I'm sure they're going to follow suit to some extent, but how important do you think it is for them to define their own path? And then, like what are you going to do or try to do as a dad to support that?
My father never pushed me into boxing. Uh, and I think that's very important to not overcast your child to want them to follow in your footsteps. I just want my sons to be good people, good human beings. Um, I want them to excel everywhere. So, like my oldest son, Noah, he's done soccer. He's currently doing flag football now. He's done t-ball. Um, I've obviously had him here in the gym to do some boxing. But I'm not on him. I'm not over top of him like a cloud and, you got to do it like this and you got to do it like that. Like if boxing is not his thing, then again, I want him to excel everywhere, whether it be
Awesome.
academics, sports, uh, just be good, man. Just be good people.
I love that. Yeah. What's he think of
Don't get limited.
boxing?
What's that?
What does he think of boxing? Your 7-year-old.
He enjoys it. He does enjoy
Yeah.
it, but he doesn't enjoy it enough to where he's in here for all my kids' classes. I may see him once a week. Yeah, if that.
So,
And
so
that's okay. And then we'll get home and we'll play around. We'll shadow box. We'll throw punches at each other. And I'm like, man, he's got a great left hook. I will say that.
that's awesome. So if he's gonna come, so I assume your wife is the one who he's convincing at home, like, Mom, I want to go to the gym today, or Mom, I'm not going to the gym today.
Yeah, yeah. I remember leaving the house one Saturday morning, and he on Friday nights he likes to sleep in our room. So we'll take. He doesn't sleep in a bed with us, but we have like this padding that's on the couch. We'll take that padding off, lay it on the floor. He just wants to be in a room with us.
Sure, sure.
We'll lay out his little bed, and he woke up one morning as I'm getting ready to walk out, and he's like, "Dad, I just had a dream." He said, "I'm gonna be a boxer just like you." And I was like, "Is that so?" I was like, "All right." Well, I said, "Noah." I said, "If that's the path that you want to go, I will help you get there." I said, "But you don't have to be a boxer just because Daddy's a boxer. Daddy's no longer a boxer. I'm now a coach. There's other things that you can do, you know, that are in the boxing category or in the field, but you don't necessarily have to be a boxer." He's like, "Oh, okay. All right." I said, "Come here." I asked him to give me a hug and, give him a kiss on the cheek. And, I went along my day. But then I had to
Yeah.
talk to my wife later on. I said, "Did you hear what your son said this morning?" As I was walking out the door, she was like, "Yeah, he said he's going to be a boxer. He ain't being no boxer." He's like, "He's going to be a doctor."
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. He's gonna work on the brains instead of brains rattling around with punches all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So, for people who, whether they're in South Florida or not in South Florida, listening to this, who might have an interest in joining up with Boca Boxing District, or if obviously if they're not living in the state, that's going to be hard for them to do. But I'd love for them to hear direct from you, like what gave you the inspiration to create the gym, and then tell us a little bit about the gym, the culture you're trying to create there, and then maybe why you think folks should join boxing gyms, whether it's if they're not down here in Florida or they are. Really, yeah, I'd just love to hear the inspiration behind it and the culture you're creating there, and then why they should join a gym.
Yeah, I think initially when I opened up, I saw a great amount of gyms opening up, but without proper teaching. And
Mm.
I just felt like this is unfair to the public to want to do something, to want to know how to do something, but not be properly guided, in the right way they should. So I was like, if I'm going to open up and when I'm going to open up a gym, I'm going to make sure people know exactly what it is that they're doing, why they're throwing this punch. You know, they're not going to just be on the bag and throwing combinations. They're going to throw the bag. They're going to throw that punch with proper technique, proper form. With offense comes defense. So you're not going to just throw a punch and stand there and wait for something to come back at you. You got to move. You got to pivot. You got to roll under. You got to block. You got to defend. And I think more or less that was my inspiration. I wanted to continue doing what I love, which was boxing, and giving back to the community what was bestowed upon me, you know, from my grandfather to my father and my uncle. I just wanted to give back to the community.
Mhm. How difficult was it to get a buy-in, right, from not just team members, because you got to get everyone fighting towards the same vision. When you're creating an organization, there inherently comes a culture with it, whether it's intentionally designed or not. I feel like yours has been intentionally designed. Now I walked into it years after it's already open, but I assume on the front end there were some growing pains and such, and finding
Oh,
the right trainers. Like what did you do? And the root of this question is really to hope like pull out some leadership lessons for our listeners so they can, maybe know like what you did from a strategy perspective, what you did from, did you create a mission, a vision, any values internally, or some non-negotiables? Was there anything that helped you get it to what it is today?
you know, I was pretty much on my Kevin Costner, man. It was like if I build it, they will come. Um, I mean, I really didn't have much business savvy or knowledge for that matter. But so I coached at American Top Team. Not only did I work with fighters, but I taught classes for the general public. And I just thought like once I opened up my doors that I would have, my following follow along right along with me. But, most of those guys were under contract and couldn't just jump ship. So, again, I didn't have much knowledge in business or marketing for that matter. And, I opened up my doors and they just came in one by one. And, the first few months were very scary. I think within the 4 months that I opened, I remember specifically the day I opened my doors, I had one person show up to class. And I literally trained this one person for a month straight. She was getting a private. And my I think my initial membership rate at that time was $99 a month. So if you fraction that down to 30 days in a month, she was literally getting a private for like $6. But
Yeah.
I showed up. I showed up every day and I trained her. And then eventually, you know, that one became two, two to five, five to seven, 7 to 10. I was like, all right, we got a class now. And I remember the girl, her name was Laura. I remember her saying like, "Man, I miss the old days when it was just me." I was like, I said, but if it was anything like the old days, these doors wouldn't have stayed open for long. And she's like, "Yeah, I know, I get it, I get it."
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, but we've had quite a bit of growing pains here. I originally started with just one unit. So, when you walk in, obviously you've been here. Those first row of bags that you see, the yellow bags in the center and the two black bags at the end, there was a wall there.
Mm.
So I just had the one unit, which was just about 1,000 square feet. And going into year two, the person next door to me had moved out. Um, I forgot what type of business she had. She had like some type of event space, planning. I don't
Mhm.
think she necessarily needed a unit for that. I think she could have met her clients at like Starbucks with a portfolio book to show what it
Yeah. Yeah.
got some stuff in storage, but she needed a storefront for it and didn't do well. So when she moved out, the landlord asked me if I would be interested in taking on the next space, and I was like, "Oh, well, I'm just starting to grow here. I don't have quite the numbers that I need to take on the second space." I said, "But if I don't grab that space and somebody moves in next door to me, they at least could be 3 years or more." So I knew if I wanted to grow, then I needed to take on that space, or I would have to move.
Hmm.
So I jumped the gun. I took on the space, and then COVID happened. So I'm like, oh, great. So I had taken on that space, was ready to go with it in January, and in March, we had to shut down due to COVID.
Mm.
So I had to shut down for 3 months. Thankfully, the landlord cut me a deal. He was like, look, he was like, for now, just I didn't lose you, did I?
No, no, I'm with you.
I had something
You
just
still,
bubble. What is
can you
this?
still see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah, cool.
They said, look, just pay half the rent for now, and then we'll get the rest on the back end. Once business continues and you start to flourish again. So I was like, all right, thank that'll be a good help. So in order to keep the memberships rolling, what I did was I tried to, just keep the community going. So I said, look, guys, can you meet me at the gym? I want to keep you guys active. We won't be able to, enter the gym to hit the bags and stuff like that, but at least we can go for a run. So I'd meet them 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'd be here as early as 6 a.m. And we would literally jog from here. We take Yamato, head east, south on Federal, go over across to Spanish River. We'd run to the beach and back to the gym. And that would be our 3 mile run and a way to keep the community together. Um, this way when the gym opened back up, it wasn't like people were out of shape or they were starting all over again. Yeah, so I mean, we had some difficult times.
Yeah.
We got through it.
Yeah. You did, man, and I'm so glad you did. It's a great place and a great again. I just want to reiterate for anyone listening in, great place to come and train not just your body but your mind. From my vantage point, it's a release that I think we all need to just to challenge ourselves. So I'm proud of what you've done, brother, and kudos to you. I look forward to seeing the continued growth. If there's plans for expansion, if and if not, just the continued expansion that happens internally in terms of the fighters that you're training out of there and the good work that you're doing. So that's awesome stuff. I want to be mindful of our time. I think I promised you we'd be just at an hour. So um, I would love to hear from you, just like some maybe lighthearted stuff. Well, I know we've gone deep throughout a lot of this, but is there anything, Dia, today, like a habit, ritual, or routine that you rely on to keep you in a good, happy, healthy, mentally healthy state as you're balancing, dad life, husband life, entrepreneur life, coach life, anything that you do beyond the self-talk you've shared with us, and I love that. That's a great, valuable resource. But anything beyond that you're like reliant on that helps you be the good guy that you are, man.
Ah, man, just be yourself, be your best self. Um, just try to listen to positive things. I know there's a lot of negativity out there in the world between the news and what's on the radio and, even some of the music that we're listening to, but just try to be the best version of yourself, and if that comes from, listen to podcasts like the one that you're giving us today, um, insightful things on TV, whether you're watching something building or inspirational, just whatever you can to stay in that positive light.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome stuff, brother. Well, Daya, I'm so grateful for you, man. This has been absolutely awesome. I'll pause there. I do see some folks still on with us, so if there's people who have any questions for Daya, feel free to put them in. I think you can put them. Last time we had issues where it had to go into the chat function and not Q&A. But if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in. But as I'm wrapping up, if those come in, we'll ask them. Otherwise, Daya, super grateful for you, man. You have been awesome. Appreciate just your messaging and how you show up in the world, and look forward to our relationship deepening over the coming months and years as well.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you again for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And again, I look forward to doing it again.
Awesome, man. Well, I will see you later on at the gym if you're still around, man. Otherwise, I'll see you next time we're both
Be
there.
here, brother. Never not working.
Okay. Well, you need to take some time off sometime, man.
This is true. This is true. I'll get my time eventually at some point.
Good stuff. All right. See you, Dyah. Thank you so much. You were
Yeah, you
awesome,
got it,
brother.
brother. Be well, man. Thank you
You
again.
too. See you, man. See everyone. Take care.